Good evening, Zimbabwe. You are listening to Studio 7, coming to you from the Voice of America on Tuesday, September 8th, 2015. This is The Connection on LiveTalk. I am Tungamili Nkomo.
And I am Satenda Gubo.
Tonight, we are discussing the opening of schools and the challenges faced by parents in terms of raising school fees.
Let's get talking live on Studio 7 and on our social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook at VOA Studio 7, and we are also on Twitter at the handle at Studio 7 VOA. We can also get things going on our WhatsApp number, and that number is +1 202 465 0318.
And of course, if you want to contribute live on air, you are very welcome. Just give us a call at the following number. That's 001 202 619 2077. That number again, 001 202 619 2077.
And of course, we are streaming live right now on the internet, on the web. You can find us at voazimbabwe.com, voandebele.com, and also on voashona.com.
Again, this is your number one youth show, The Connection, coming to you live from the Voice of America in Washington.
As the schools opened today, money woes were at the top of the class, and parents say they are failing to source funds for this term to send their children for classes. Teachers who spoke and sent messages to Studio 7 today said many of their classrooms were empty as most of the parents are no longer working and able to afford to pay school fees in Tunga.
Yes, Ms. T, and with these school fees pricing, also comes the burden of paying for set books, uniforms, and other necessary items for the new school term. Meanwhile, teachers themselves are facing cuts, leaving an already vulnerable sector at risk. So tonight, we open up the airwaves. We want to hear from you, parents, school kids, teachers. What's your story?
We hope everyone can let us know what's going on, what happened today in their areas. We already heard so much from parents and teachers in their various areas, and we'll read those messages a little bit later on.
Indeed, lichona njani zurugandaba emakhaya yikudibana kuhlelo lwabasakhulayo uhlelo The Connection. Lamhlanje ngolwesibili sisakaza singapha emsakazweni we-Voice of America ose-Washington. Lamhlanje ke sikhangela udaba lokuvulwa kwezikolo zivuliwe lamhlanje. Abaningi abazali esikhulume labo bakhala ngokuthi ama-fees, imali zesikolo bakithi kazitholakali kalula. Sibonile abantu abasebenza izisebenzi ezedlula inkulungwane ezingama-20, more than 20,000 belahlekelwa imisebenzi kunyanga ezimbili ezedluleyo. Kulandela ke isinqumo somthethwandaba we-Supreme Court esenza kwabalula kubaqhashi ukuthi baxotshe izisebenzi mahlayana. Ngalokho abantu abaningi balahlekelwe imisebenzi kakhulu. Ngakho bathi kabakwanisi bathola inzima ngokuthola ke imali yama-fees, ukuthenga ama-uniform, ukuthenga ama-grocery abantwana okuya okuhamba lawo esikolo. Yilo ke udaba esingalo lamhlanje. Lisithayeleke ucingo sizwe ukuthi lina lenelisile yini kuwathola lawo ma-fees. Hongo vatereri trukusangana muchirongwa The Connection nasi nemswe chipiri nyaya iri mugango nasi tiri kutarisa kuvhurwa kwezvikoro. Tuzwa kuti zvikoro zvavhurwa nhasi asi vabereki vakawanda vari kuchema nekuti ma-school fees ari kunetsa kuwana nenyaya yekuti tinoziva kuti vashandi vakawanda vanodarika 20,000 vakarasikirwa nemabasa mumwedzi miviri yapfuura. Naizvozvo vanhu vakawanda vari kuti nyaya dzema-school fees, kutengera vana mbatya dzechikoro, mauniform, mabhuku zviri kuvaremera zvikuru.
Thank you then, Tunga. And we can introduce our in-studio guest. That is Tato Mochone, who is, of course, an attachment with us, a Mandela Washington Fellow. And we've been making sure that whenever we can pick her brain, Tunga, we are doing so. Tato, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Now, of course, your background, as we know, you are a Mandela Washington Fellow. You also are in the media sector, but we found out that you are a trained teacher.
Yeah.
So we thought to ourselves, why not have that wealth from your perspective and find out, how they are doing things back home in Lesotho. Let us know how things work in regards to the education sector. How are things faring?
Okay, what is happening in Lesotho is that we have free primary education system. So the public schools, primary level, you don't pay anything. And it also comes with a feeding scheme. So the kids are being fed at the same time. And there's also provision of stationery. So it is not a hassle. But the majority of parents are still taking their children to private schools.
And how much do private schools cost? What is that looking like?
That would be somewhere between $5,000 US to 10,000, depending on the school that that particular parent chose.
A term?
Annually,
okay, per year, which is still very, very.
It is
very
still
much,
very. It is, yeah, exactly, because that is not for some people. That is not even like their annual salary, so it is still a lot. And the ones that do that is still a struggle. The majority of people that I know, I take my kids to a private school in South Africa. It's still a hassle, but as a parent, you want what's best for the kids. And I realized that with the introduction of the free primary education, there was a very steep decline in the quality of education. As compared to in my time, we did pay fees. It was something that parents could afford to pay. It was very minimal, but the quality of education was very good. But now it has gone down drastically.
Why? What's the problem?
I think...
Is it the quality of teachers? Is it, the government?
It is still the same teachers, but I don't know. I think maybe it comes with motivation. Yeah, like... With when you pay fees, where you're putting money at, you can complain. You are you have grounds to complain and say, this is not what I'm paying for. I think you're not giving my child enough education. But when it is free, and I realized that with many things, when things are free, we just accept what we get. You don't complain because you feel like I'm actually being done a favor. So I think that's how parents feel like this is enough, this is it. And when you take a look at a child who is in class 5, in a public school, you compare that particular child to a child in class 2 in a private school. The difference is you'd really think the one in a private school was actually older. They are so advanced, they are eloquent, they are frequent, and and the self-confidence and everything. But the ones in public schools, it's such a challenge, I should say.
Thank you there, Miss Machone. This is The Connection. Once again, those who have just tuned in. And we are reachable at the following numbers, 001 202 619 2077. That number again, 001 202 619 2077. Give us a call and tell us how you are faring. We have our first guest tonight, Ms. T. Who is it?
Tinawa Maxwell Rafe Moyo, who is the National Coordinator of the Education Coalition of Zimbabwe. Thank you so very much for joining us on The Connection this evening.
Thank you. Good evening, listeners.
We also have Simbarashe Moyo, Students Solidarity Trust Chairperson. Mr. Moyo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, and let me greet all the listeners to the program.
Okay, Mr. Rafi Moyo first. Parents that we spoke to are complaining about school fees, and we know things are not all well in terms of the economy. People are losing jobs. What's your take on this?
Thank you very much. I think the perspective of losing, before we even talk of the perspective of losing jobs,
we should look at the provision of education to the citizens by the state. If we were to trace back to what the country or the state has ratified to according to the Dakar framework of 2000, the country agreed to the EFA goals, which provided for free basic education. And also the MDG number 2, which was talking of universal primary education. So we are talking of a country that is ratified to providing education to the citizens, free basic compulsory education. So without even going to the job losses, it is the mandate of the state to provide free education to its citizens. Not providing this education will have ripple effects, will create crimes and other sorts of social vices you can talk of, because the state has failed to provide what it is supposed to provide. Now, coming to the situation, like we've always said, the cost of education is not just in the fees and levies. There are other hidden costs that include uniforms, that include food, and the general upkeep of the child as they go to school. So when people look at provision of fees, they are looking at a small figure and they are saying, yes, everyone can afford $10. But bringing a child to school, there are many more other things that are involved. The hidden cost of education are coming into effect. So with the economic challenges like this, it becomes even worse, because what parents are now worried of are the livelihoods, to make sure that there is food on the table before the child goes to school. Because even if they go to school and on an empty stomach, then nothing will happen to that child. Many children are dropping out of school because they go to school on an empty stomach. So the alternative would be to make sure that they help their parents to find food. So I think we are going to have so many challenges. It's also being given the fact that DIMO has just dwindled. And those people who have lost their jobs were supposed to be getting something from DIMO, which has just shrunk to very minimum standards.
Thank you there, Warafe Moyo. I will come to you, Mr. Simbarashe Moyo. Chimbotara enyukuti mjugufamba say chitarisa issues here education in Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much. I think I will agree with what my colleague has just said, but I will come from the perspective of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that through Article 26 talks about or mandates member states to provide basic education. And I think as a nation we've gone in I would say a positive direction in enshrining or domesticating that international convention. We've done that through Section 77, Section 75 of our Constitution, where we talk about the right to education, where we talk about the right to free basic education. So that then, in my view, is actually being fought by the situation that we are witnessing on the ground, the situation where our parents are losing jobs at a rate that is shocking the very conscience of mankind, that is shocking even the parents themselves. So, given that situation, we are now having that scenario where free basic education cannot be sort of realized, because the government is in sixes and fours in terms of trying to make sure that it provides for free basic education. So we are having a very difficult situation on the ground, where parents end up, failing to raise the necessary, fees, the necessary, levies to make sure that our children can or are able to access basic free education. So this to me is sort of a recipe for a big disaster, because when you don't invest in education as a nation, surely what would you then invest in? Because when you invest in education, you are propelling the nation to greater heights. But as a nation, we seem to be fumbling for answers in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Mnumzana Moyo bayakhuluma lapha abamnumzana uRafi Moyo lo Moyo Maxwell Simbarashi njengabaningi bakhala ngokuthi ama fees imali edingakala esikolo kayitholakali kalula kodwa ke kulilungelo lakhe wonke umntwana ukubana athole imfundo yikho ukuthi elakusasa lakhe libe ngelicacileyo ndambotaura earlier tatenda ne mutereri vanonzivo va Hillary Mateo angachitaura kuti ane mwana anodzidza ku private school ku Harare saka angachichema ne fees ari kuti per term he has to pay $700 saka ari kuti yezvinezvo akupfunga nezvekutengesa motokari yake nenyaya yekuti mafees acho anetsa let's play that tape from Hillary Mateo.
Kutaura chokwadi mwana wamai kuno kuZimbabwe mari iri kunetsa izvezvi handisati ndatombobhadhara mari yefees $700 panodzidza iprivate school mother touch muno muHarare mari iri kutonetsa zvototi nekuda kwenhamo yemari iyo ndava kutofunga kutotengesa kamotikari kangu kamo kananga ndinako kuti ndingozowanawo imwe yacho $700 iyo ndinobhadhara kazhinji ndiri munhu angachibhadhara mari yese pagore yese kamwe chete pagore asi kuti zvina sikutoita sikutonetsa ndotowana mari iyoyo yacho iyoyo apa ndinotowana vamwe vana vehanzvadzi yangu yekwababa mukuru vangu vandinodzidzisa handitori namari ndivabhadhare zvakatooma
ko $700 per term primary school boarding ere
day school private school chikoro chakazvimirira chega unoziva nzvimbo dzezvikoro dzinonetsazve kuwanaka saka ukatowana kuprivate school wotongoshingirira kuti mwana adzidze zvinhu zvava kunetsa nekuda kweuori kuti nzvimbo dziwanikwe mumapublic schools zvakare kunoko saka
muchazvifambisa sei apa vamateo
ndiri kutoedza nepandinogona napo kutoti kana zvikatofamba ndikakwanisa kuwana munhu wokuchinjana naye motikari wotopawo mari mbishana kuti ndikwanise kunobhadhara fees dzomwana zvinenge zvichitova nani nemari dzevana vehama dzangu vandinoendesa kuchikoro zvinogona kutondifambirawo zviri nani asi vanhu futizve havatori namari dzacho idzodzo
saka pamusoro pe$700 munenge muchidawo yekutenga mabhuku nemayunifomu kana kuti iri ipapo yese
$700 yakangomira iri yega mayunifomu yatova imwe nyaya kuti izvoyo ndotofara kutenga mamwe mayunifomu
avo ndiva Hillary Mateo ndakurukura navo earlier on.
Of course, you were saying there that he's paying $700 per term for his child for day schooling. What Tato was speaking about earlier, the choice between public or private, but in Zimbabwe, of course, you are paying nonetheless.
That's crazy. I think, we are over-commercializing education, and that's not a good thing.
It's a challenge, yeah.
Yeah, silo omunye esilaye kuhlelo lamhlanje ngononsikelelo Ndlovu nonsi siyakwamukela kuhlelo. Yeah, of course unonsi ube kuhlelo leMandela Washington Fellowship lonyaka basukile nje lapha kunyanga esanda kwedlula. Sikhuluma ngodaba lwama school fees lapha Mandlovu lawo lomntwana oyesikolo grade 6 zimi njani indaba zama fees lapha
ngizwathikizeni kamandla baba lapha othi yena ufamile isikole yarobhadala $700 ukuthi njani phezulu abanga lokuthi njani athengise noma yakho ukuthi ngelifisa umntana sikolo bona ngani nje siku-situation efanayo
nonsi ucingo lwakho luya asizwanani kuhle luyabhampa kahle siqume sikufonele futhi
kulungile
Okay, I was saying there that she has a bad line, so we'll drop her line and call her right back.
And while we wait for that, Ntunga, maybe we should take a moment to read some of the comments that our listeners sent to us over WhatsApp and, of course, over Facebook to hear what their thoughts are. Those are the ones who give us the up-to-date, on-the-ground information. We have Koma Wilson, who says, most pupils came to school, but quite a number did not attend. Most teachers are not happy with threats they are subjected to, which have been named by PSC witch hunt. Those who are still to get their salaries are struggling to make their ends meet. And in some cases, the audit team is only seeing those they didn't see when they conducted the previous audit. Another says, in Shurugwi, the schools opened well with teachers ready for their duties. No child is reported to have been sent home for not paying school fees. That is from Brilliant Joe in Shurugwi. And we have Rabsen Anoti. I'm teaching at Mazamba High School in Mashingo. The turnout of pupils was very low. You have some other ones?
Yes, we have amenwana kunyora zita rake asari kuti ndiri teacher wekugokwe nhasi kwangouya vana vechikoro vashoma pane vashoma vacho vauya vanga vasina mabhuku vachitoti kumba hakuna mari yekutengerwa mabhuku. Varairidzi vanga vasina kugadzikana vechingotya kudzingwa basa sezvo vepublic service vachingoti vhundutsira misi nemisi.
Tato, will come back to you. You're hearing what people are talking about, the education structure in Zimbabwe. You spoke about the education structure back home. What are some of the challenges that you spoke about parents, but what are the kids faring when it comes to these educational challenges? Where do they falter, or where does it come in that the kids are affected directly?
It affects them psychologically and academically, because you can imagine if you send your kid to school, you afford to pay the fee, but you can't afford the shoes. The embarrassment, what that has, the effect it has on their self-esteem, on their productivity. At the end of the day, they spend the entire day focusing on how I'm looking like. And, kids can be cruel. They are not aware that they are being cruel. But then they will ridicule other children. And to an extent that the child ends up not focusing. So the first caller said, even if they can send them to school, the other challenge is books, fees. So it boils down to the same thing. Even if the education is free, people are poor. And the challenges that come with that is some have to walk a long distance. When you get to school, you are tired. And then they haven't had food and they can only eat at lunchtime at school. So the level of productivity is very low. And I think affordability affects the general productivity of a child at the end of the day. Then there's the other issue of the girl child. Sanitary towels. So many of them miss like 5 days of school when they're menstruating because they can't afford that. And then they have to resort to unhygienical means of taking care of themselves. So poverty affects not being able, and this economic crisis that we're facing right now, it is going to affect the general productivity at the end of the day and the general well-being of the child, because I think the minute their self-esteem is affected at this age, it just goes on.
Okay, siyabonga Thato. Unonsikelelo Ndlovu sesila njalo ecingweni. Njengokutsho kwami ngaphambilini unonsikelelo obekuhlelo leMandela Washington Fellowship njalo ngumzali olomntwana ofunda ugrade 6. Nonsi siyakwamukela kuhlelo.
Ngiyabonga, sengizwakala.
Asuzwakala ngcono. Ubusakhuluma ngendaba yamafizi, qhubeka.
Bengisakhuluma ngisathi mina kubuhlungu kakhulu ngoba lezikolo ebezingani ziyazwisisa zivuma ukuthi mhlawumbe abazali babhadale ingxenye yama-school fees bese beqedisa ngokuya kwethemu. Lazo zivuka okunye kulithemu. Abantwana bonke bahlalisiwe emahholo nxa umzali engabhadalanga waqeda imali kumbona esikwelede esisasele from itheme edluleyo. Kuthiwa hayi abantwana bazahlala ehholo khonapho ababhadale baqeda yibo abazafunda. Ngibona ngathi lokhu akutshengiseli ukuthi izikolo ziyabona ukuthi umumo womkhono munjani elizweni. Bengikhangelela ukuthi ngabantu abazisisayo ukuthi hayi umumo kawusekho normal, ngakho asingeke siqhubeke senze izinto ngendlela enormal, kodwa kube lokukhulumisana phakathi kwabazali bezikolo kuzwisisane, kuvunyelwane ukuthi hayi siyavuma imali ayikho kodwa lesikolo kufuze sifanfine, so abazali bazabhadala imbijana kodwa khanya hayi akulakuzwanana khonapho, izikolo lazo zifuna imali yazo igcwele. Lokhu ngibona ngani ku-affecta kakhulu abantwana, ngoba khangela umzali uzagcine ibhadele yonke imali naleyo, kodwa umntwana akasoze afunde wonke amalanga. Kunala amalanga azabe etshone kuleli khona ehholu, umzali azathola imali. Ngibona ngani lokho yinto kumele ikhangelisiswe naleyo.
Wena umntwana wakho umbhadalela malini ngethemu?
$1,100 laye ngomunye ose-private school. Asomali encane sibili esikhuluma ngayo. Imagine nxa kuphala mina engisakorokoropa, kulo umzali ophelelwe ngumsebenzi osebenzini kodwa umntwana kufuze afunde, ongaziyo ukuthi aqale ngaphi abambe ngaphathile ngaphi. Hayi kunzima selezi.
Siyabonga Nonsi eqhubeka ubambile khonapho benge ndavundiswa ne$700
yayaka futhi number yathawa.
This is crazy. $1,500. Oh, this is crazy. Silomlaleli ubaba uNcube South Africa. Siyakwamukela uhlelo Ncube.
Yebo baba.
Yes, khuluma ngendaba yama-fees baba, akusiphi umbono wakho?
Yebo, nami ngiyabona umbono wamafizi. Amafizi like ezikoleni asihlukumeza kakhulu. Njengathi like abantu abase-South Africa siyasebenza khona lokho, kodwa imuli zethu okumanje ziyalamba, nasemasimini ngithi asitholanga lokudla. Kodwa imali zasesikoleni ziyakhuphuka njalo, yabona. So mangabe ucabanga ukubhadala esikoleni, uphinde uthenge lokudla, uhambisele abantwana imali yempuphu, yonke lento leyo, uzothola ukuthi uzogcina ungasabhadalanga esikoleni, then abantwana bayaxoshwa. Uma bexoshwa abantwana abafundi, at the end uyagcina wena uyibhadalile leyo mali, kodwa kusala abantu bakho vele kufaka ukuthi abafundi. Yabona ukuthi leyo nto leyo isibisele emuva vele.
Bangaka abantwana bakho abaye esikolo Ncube?
Abami bathathu.
Baku secondary kumbe baku primary?
Baku primary.
Wena elisile ukuyithola imali yama-fees?
Kuyasehlula okwamanje bengakayenelisi ukuthi ngiyithole, but ngiyazi ukuthi okusala bazoshwa vele. Ngeke baze bafunde. Mina ngombono wami ngicabanga ukuthi igovernment kube iyangenela, ngoba kuyaziwa ukuthi elizweni kahle kunamali. Inkinga manje ku-affecteka abantwana ngodubo oluselizweni, ukuthi ngabe igovernment iyangenela mhlawumbe incedise ukuthi mhlawumbe abangakhona ukuthi babhadalele abantwana bonke, abanye bakwazi ukubafundisa mhlawumbe kuma non-organization ama-ORAP nama-World Vision kanjalo.
Okay, bekule nhlelo nje ebesiphathisa abantwana ikakhulu abaswelayo esifana leBeam. Kodwa udubo ngokuswelakala kwemali abanye bagcine besuswa kulolo hlelo bekhala nje abazali. Kodwa siyabonga Ncube ngokungena kuhlelo.
Siyabonga ba.
Yeah, that was caller Ncube from South Africa, also telling us he has 3 kids, primary school going, and he has not yet paid for their fees because he doesn't have the money.
Yeah, times are very tough, as many people are saying. But of course, in Tunga, we are breaking to our the end of our first half, and we'll be taking a break. But of course, as usual, encouraging all our radio listeners, thanking you for listening. But make sure, as usual, you head over to the internet, to our websites, where you can continue listening to our program. That is voazimbabwe.com, voandebele.com, and voashona.com. And to our guests in Tunga,
Maxwell Simbarashe nonsikelelo lingayikachana siyaphenduka ngemva komzuzu owodwa abe radio lilale.
Good evening again. For those of you who have been joining us, thank you. And for those of you who are just joining us now, you are watching Live Talk, The Connection, coming to you from the Voice of America in Washington, D.C. And this evening, we are discussing the opening of schools today in Zimbabwe and the challenges that parents are facing day to day to be able to pay school fees and also get their children into the education sector. Tunga.
And of course, in studio, we have our one and only Mr. To Mochone. And on the line, we have Maxwell Rafi Moyo of the Education Coalition of Zimbabwe, a national coordinator. We also have Simbarashe Moyo, Students Solidarity Trust chairperson, as well as Non-Sigelelo Ndlovu, a Mandela Washington fellow and a parent.
And Toya Kwamuri wa Rafe Moyo, just looking at issue equality of education, I think one of our listeners is pointing out, Uti, you might be paying for school fees each term, but you aren't guaranteed that you'll be given the level of education in terms of quality that you would expect. And we know Zimbabwe has been high on its literacy rate, education in the country, very high amongst those within Africa. What's your take on the quality of education in Zimbabwe at this present moment? Hello? Warafe Moyo?
Am I?
Taurenyo.
So I was saying, before I respond to that directly, I wanted to talk about the provision of private education versus public education. Now, when we have a concern like this, where we are worried about affording education, I think broadly what we are worried about
Thank you there. Nancy, let's look at private schools versus, public. Your kid goes to a private school, which obviously costs more. Why did you prefer to go private instead of public?
I think basically the point that Maxwell just brought about, my child started going to school in 2010. That's when he went to grade 1. And if you recall, there were massive strikes of teachers throughout public schools at the time. And basically kids would go for half a term without learning because teachers are on strike because either their salaries haven't been paid on time or because they are complaining that their salaries are too low. So the incentive for the teacher that he's talking about. And because of that, because of the situation within the public schools, you will find that a lot of the qualified people, the experienced people, are actually moving towards the private schools. And so that's where you will get the better qualified teacher, that's where you get the more experienced teacher, but also that's where you will get the resources, basically in terms of learning aids for your child. There's a very big gap, which is actually worrying in terms of the facilities in the private schools compared to those in the public schools. Considering that the majority of the Zimbabwean children go to public schools, the gap is very worrying, and also it has an impact on the quality of education that we have as a country. Because if the bulk of our children are going to be attending school where they are there's a shortage of teachers, where the teacher-student ratio is unreasonably high, and where they actually have to walk very long distances just to get to school. All those things, they contribute to the quality of the education. So really, it's good if somebody has the option of taking their child to a private school. But I think we need to consider the parent who actually cannot afford, who doesn't have that as an option. We really need to do something about the quality of education in our public schools.
Thanks there Nancy. Silomlaleli tatenda uWillard Moyo eHarare. Siyakwamukela kuhlelo mnumzana.
Babona baba.
Kunjani kona ngapho baba?
Hayi kungcono singazi khona ngapha eMelika.
Hayi ku right ngapha baba. Kusipho umbono wakho?
Kukhulunywa ngani ngise kuhambeni so angazwanga ngike kwathi kukhulunywa ngani ngokuvula kwezikolo.
Isikhuluma uvula kwezikolo ba.
Ya kakhulu kulusizi kube lusizi nje kuphela ukuthi selingifonela ku radio isikhathile. Njengabantu esimela abantu emareserve ngani bayethanda ukuthi bezwe ukuthi abasicela ukuthi sibakhulumele khona kuyazwakala kungasenani ke ngifokazane ukanje ngikhuluma laye.
Hayi ngonkomo baba.
Unkomo hayi izikolo zivuliwe sibili kodwa ke uhlupho esilalo ke kade sinama school fees. Abazali abaningi izakhumbula lokhu ukuthi kube ne retrenchment yezisebenzi. Kube lo hlupho lokuthi vele ku retrenchwa izisebenzi i-80% to 90% ngabasebenzi. Bese kukhathaza ukuthi phezukwalokho nanzi lezikolo sezivuliwe. Elizweni lakithi lonyaka kule ndlala eyinye bangalisa izilimo zatsha izulu lahamba masinyana kuvunwa ngalutho. So kuyilisaka phezu kwelisaka phezu kwabazali abahluphekayo abavele bengalalutho. Esingasakwaziyo ukuthi uhulumende njengoba silaye kule plani bani ngoba i-poverty isebantwini, i-retrenchment isebantwini, unemployment isebantwini, all those things being caused by this ruling party is its government structure. So esikalele ukuthi ngabayancedisa ukuthi basiphathise khonapho ukuthi abazali benze njani ngoba kusala abantwana kuze bafunde bayisikolo izinto zikhambe ziye phambili.
Hayi siyabonga mnumzana Moyo. Wena ulabantwana abayisikolo?
Mina umntwana wesikolo babo yedwa okuqala.
Go primary kumbe ku secondary?
Primary baba.
So hlawulile imfanelo?
Inhlawulo zesikolo.
Yebo baba.
Sengihlawulile kodwa ngihlawula mina ngiyayelelisa ukuthi ngiyithole ngoba ngisesemutsha sakwanisa ukugijima. Phela izizalwazi lamaqembu ke zingasasebenziyo lesenseni yazo zithola $2 ngenyanga. Zizakuya ngaphi ukuze zihlawule inhlawulo? Mina ngihlawulile ngale inhlawulo kodwa kangiyenelisanga yonke ngoba kufuneka imali eningi kakhulu. Mina ngikwanise ukuthi ngibhadale ihafu yakhona okunye ngehlulekile zabo lokho ngincengancengana lapho. Kodwa i-government ngabe iyangenela abantu aba-vulnerable nama-elderly people bakwanisa ukuthi bafundiselwe abantu ababo ngendlela engamabhadala
Hayi chayikaleni mnumzana Moyo siyabonga ukuphathisa kuhlelo.
Ngiyabonga likongifonela.
Siza kuthinta futhi ba.
Yebo siyabonga ba.
Okay, bye-bye. That was Willard Moyo, of course, saying he was able to pay for his primary school kid. But he's saying the government should, address this issue because there's, thousands and thousands of people out there who are not able to do the same.
Atombo yakwamuri wa Simbarashe Moyo, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm still on the line.
Okay, so we'll throw you maybe a hard question, but the role of government in all this. We know there was the issue of the BEAM funds, the cash transition funds that Mr. Rafe Moyo spoke about earlier. But what can government really do at this point, looking at the number and the frequency of parents and children who are unable to make it for schools, to go to school?
Thank you very much. Obviously, as parents, we expect the government to play its traditional role. But given the circumstances that we are in at the moment, you all know, you and me, that we are in a depressed economy. Things are not going on well in the country. They do not have enough resources to play their traditional role. So all we are saying as parents is that we expect the government to play their traditional role, whereby they support basic education, because we are all agreed on the point that it's the government's role to provide free basic primary education. And this is what they've agreed on, even under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and so forth. This is a role that they have to play. But because of the circumstances that we are in, you find that in most cases the government ends up failing to live up to expectations. But as parents, we will continue to remind the government that it is the government that stands to benefit more if it plays its role, the role that it is supposed to play. So we just continue to raise the voice. We will continue to remind them. We will continue through lobbying and advocates to knock sense into their heads that when it comes to education, it's about making sure that education is accessed by the citizens of this country, to make sure that education is affordable, to make sure that it is adaptable, and all the other, factors that you talk about when you talk about the access to education.
Va Rafe Moyo vanhu vakawanda vari kuti dai hurumende yatora matano, asi zvii zvingaitwa nehurumende chaizvo? Ko va Rafe Moyo togona kutaura nerurimi rwamai here ipa?
Just going to Tato before we go to our column, Nyarazare Parunare. Tato, how did your government implement that changeover for the free primary education? How was that, and how did it bear any issues on the whole fiscal space of your country?
I think it was well received by many people, but I think that was before we could really see the implications. Yeah, because people were still paying fees, and all of a sudden there was introduction of the free primary education, and everyone was excited. Free books, free lunch, and then it just came with the demotivation, and teachers were not just as excited about their duties as they were earlier. So it has really gone down, and I think it's a good initiative because it is also the case in South Africa. I studied in South Africa myself, high school. I didn't pay any fee, but the quality of education is very good. So I really think governments should be doing something to enforce the productivity. I think teachers are demotivated. One of the callers talked about the environment in which the teachers are working. Those are the things that the government should be looking into. Resources, sometimes there are no chalks, sometimes like the distance, you get there, you walk like for 2 hours, and then you get there as a person, you are tired, and you just can't be at your best. So those are the issues that government should be looking into. And meeting, it's a basic need. Education is a basic need. Meeting citizens halfway, because if it doesn't happen, then we're still in a vicious cycle of poverty. The cycle has to be broken at some point, and that is by government trying to meet citizens halfway by providing basic education for free, at least in Zimbabwe.
And what's the literacy rate in your country?
I cannot be precise, but we are good. We are good. I know Zimbabwe is said to be the best, but we are good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Mochone. I'm glad you said you're good, you're not better. Otherwise, I was going to ask you, you're better than who? Because
I know Zimbabwe is the best in Africa, as far as I know.
Yeah, but, tragically, thousands and thousands of graduates educated as, they are. Some are selling, juice cars in Harare, selling fruits, vegetables. People with, more than 2 degrees, master's degrees. It's a tragedy.
It's unfortunate because, like right now, we are complaining about people not being able to afford fees. These are the very same people that went to school that have their first degrees and their master's degrees. They are employed and they're working for government, but still they cannot afford fees to take their kids to decent schools. It's really sad. The people that I graduated with in 2008, the majority of them are still at home doing nothing because they're simply they can't find jobs. So it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Indeed.
Kakhulu. Sisize kuwe isikhangela ubunzima obuselizweni. Umntwana wesikolo nxa ekhangela abanye abantwana abalama degrees abangasebenziyo mhlamba abangamavenda abathengisa esitaladeni, kodwa umuntu efundile. Umntwana onjalo oya esikolo uyamconvince njani ukuthi ukuya esikolo kuqhakathekile nxa ebona abanye abafundileyo bengela msebenzi? Halo Nonsi? Nonsikelelo? Nonsikelelo, yeah, I think we lost her there. Ndibvunze ba moyo. Ndangachibvunza Nonsi wa moyo kuti kana uri mbere kune mwana anoenda kuchikoro mwana iye anenge achitarisa vamwewo vakadzidza vane madegrees asi havana mabasa vari kutengesa mumigwagwa. Mwana akadaro ari kuenda kuchikoro kana uri mbereki unomuconvinsa sei nekukosha kwechikoro?
Ndingangoti zvinotinetse kuti ukwanise kutaura nemwana akadero kuti aone kukosha kwechikoro. Iye achiona vakainda vakapedza vakaita zvidzidzo zvepamusoro vari kutambura vari kunhonga svose nemuromo vachiwanika vachiita mabasa avasingafaniri kunge vachiita. Saka mwana akadero isusu sevabereki zviri kutiomera kuti tingati pachirungu kumupa confidence, kumupa kudziridzo yokuti zveshuwa chikoro chinhu chakakosha kuti aite. Saka tinoboedzawo tine patinogona napo kuti aone kuti zveshuwa chikoro chinhu chinofanira kuitwa mune ramangwana. Pamwe zvinhu zvinokwanisa kuchinja, vanhu vokwanisa kupembera nekudzidza kwavanenge vaita, vokwanisa kuwana mabasa anoenderana nekudzidza kwavanenge vaita. Asi pari zvino zviri kunetsa ndekuti hazvisi zvatiri kuona, hazviso zviri kuonekwa nevana. Vana vari kuona zvinhu zvakasiyana nezvavanenge vachiudzwa nevabereki.
Aiwa, tinotenda mukoma. Timbotora mutereri Munyaradzi. Wakati yako Munyaradzi?
I think Anzi yakata.
Anzi yakata.
Yakata line yake.
Okay, we will call Munyaradzi back.
Tato, maybe the same question to you, what Ntunga was asking our guest here on the line. How do you motivate a child? You're a teacher yourself, so how do you motivate a child when they come to you and say, okay, fine, you want me to go to school, primary, secondary, college, but when I look around me, my parents, my brothers, my sisters, they all themselves are busy selling, their vendors, they're selling things just to get by. How do you motivate someone and say to them, no, it's okay, you should definitely still want to spend your time and go to school?
It's one of those things when we have to talk about things like hope, because it's such a depressing, hopeless case when you see so many of your people that you went to school with and they're unemployed. It's very difficult for you as a parent and as a teacher to how do you say? What do you say? What are you promising them if their mothers did not go to school? That you can start your own business on what capital? So it's a challenge. But I think we have to live on hope, and that at least you have something to fall back on. Yeah. In case something comes up, you have your education.
Thank you there, Tato. We now have mutereri wedu va Munyaradzi. Va Munyaradzi tinamugamuchirai muchirongwa. Yakata futi foni yavo ndofunga haidi kuti titaure navo muchirongwa chedu.
Maybe we can read one or two more messages in Tunga. I'm not sure how many we have. We have Sisi Anel Wanoti. Most children did not go to school in Beatrice area as most of their parents are no longer working and they can't afford paying levies. It's so pathetic.
Indeed, and we've been talking about motivation and motivating teachers and all that. We know teachers are poorly remunerated, and some of them, I was told, I don't know whether it's still happening, but some had become traders in courts. They would do their stuff at work, right? And on the sidelines, maybe somebody selling sweets and, doing some kind of small business just to get by. But those are not... When we grew up, teachers were highly regarded, and many people were aspiring to be teachers, including myself. But
you would be a very good teacher, I think.
I would make a pathetic teacher. I can't teach anything. I'm telling you. First of all, I don't have the patience with somebody. You need to have patience as a teacher.
Indeed.
And but especially for adults, I don't have patience with adults. Who should know better. That's why I would make a terrible teacher.
Indeed. I think we have our other guest is back on the line in Tunga. Nonsi, I think, is with us again.
Nonsi, super ndukile kungwen.
Sengiphendulile.
Okay, hey luyahlupha ucingo lwakho. Bengisabuza lapho ukuthi umntanakho nxa khangela abanye abantwana ungumzali ulomntwana esikolo, abanye abantwana bagcwele esitaladeni balama degrees kabasebenzi, abanye ngabathengisa ama juice, bathengisa ama fruits, bathengisa yonke inyakanyaka. Umntwana oya esikolo uyamconvince njani ukuthi kuqhakathekile ukubana ayesikolo, yena ekwazi ukuthi njalo kubona ukuthi abanye abafundileyo kabalamsebenzi?
Yeah. Unzima umbuzo wakho ngoba kuluhlupho sibili kakhulu. Thina vele kudala sikhule sisethusela ukuthi ungekela ukubhala ihomework uzathengisa lapha nekhoneni, ungekela ukuya esikolo angidaba zakho sozithola umsebenzi. Kodwa abakhathesi kulolu ukuthi akubuza ukuthi ingane umalume le degree kodwa uthengisa ijuice card. So akunzima sibili, kodwa siyaya nje sizama ukuba convince abantwana njengabazali, ngoba iqiniso yikuthi vele nxa ungela mfundo angiboni ukuthi ungaya ngaphi empilweni.
Limqotho lelo no siqhubeka kubambile hansi mtereri wedu tambata zvekare va munyaradzi. Makadi yenyu va munyaradzi? Halo va munyaradzi?
Mamchingondita on and off ndita
ronare rwenyu ruri kunetsa mukoma. Asi nguva dzafamba tipei pfungwa dzenyu.
Anyway, pfungwa dzangu I thought kuti tanga tichibva kutaura nezve atmosphere yesituation yanhasi patanga vana vechikoro.
Ndiyo nyaya iri mugango.
Ndo iri mugango. But then ini mazo allow debate kuti ribate the global picture education system in Zimbabwe. This is where vapana vangu yomfana Simba na vapana Rafemo ma academics in that area, ma gurus in that area. But in any contribution yangu, I'm not taking anything away from them. That was wonderful. Nyaya yangu yakarerekera ku nyaya ya nhasi because I've been able to go around. I've also been able to phone around to find out what exactly has been happening. Ekutanga wakuru wangu nyaya yapinda mu ministry especially primary and secondary. Uncertainty, especially on the part of my educators. This is my entry point, and this is where I'm going to be coming from. The fact is that there have been audits, so-called audits that have been happening and that are still continuing and things like that. Zvisina ani akazvitaurirwa zvakonzeresa zvakawanda pazuva ranhasi. Zvisina kutaura nezvefees kuti a lot of children did not go to school because they do not have or they do not have mafees acho.
Mune 40 seconds va munyaradzi nguva dzafamba.
Teaching fraternity manga muri frozen today because of what is happening. There is a serious disconnect between the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education and Commission. Commission is the Ministry of Education. And as a result, this is what is bringing in my problems at Rikuana Eye. Maticha chaiwo akadzingwa akanzi hapa basa rasi kutambira samuda kuti vandoticha chii
ko imwemi muri murairidzi here mukoma munyaradzi
mukurusa
saka tinofana kukufonerai
tichamufonera tikakurukura nenyaya nguva dzapera nhasi tasvika kumagumo kwechirongo.
Tinotenda mukoma munyaradzi. And on that note, Ntunga, we also say thank you to our other guests, Nonsikelelo Ndlovu, Mandela Washington Fellow, Simbarashe Moyo with the Student Solidarity Trust. He's a chairperson there. And last but not least, Mr. Maxwell Rafe Moyo, who is the National Coordinator of the Education Coalition of Zimbabwe, and also our in-studio guest, Tacho Mochoni, who's also
in-studio teacher,
who's also a Mandela Washington Fellow. Thank you, as usual, for that. And we say good night to all our listeners.
Good night, folks. Let's meet again next Tuesday.